The billionaire who married the wrong woman. On my wedding day, the groom whispered, "You're not the bride I chose." I smiled sweetly and replied, "Too bad, you're stuck with me now." That was the moment our disastrous marriage began. At exactly 9 o'clock on the morning of my twin sister's wedding, I was standing in my apartment burning pancakes while wondering if Emma was finally getting the fairy tale she'd always dreamed about. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. The second I heard my mother's hysterical sobbing, I knew the universe had other plans for me. "Elena, Emma's gone." The spatula slipped from my fingers. "Gone where?" "She ran away." 20 minutes later, I stood in the bridal suite staring at a handwritten note. "I'm sorry, I can't marry someone I've only met 6 times. I won't spend my life trapped in a business deal. Please forgive me. Love, Emma." Silence filled the room. Dad looked exhausted. Mom looked ready to faint. "If this wedding doesn't happen," Dad said quietly, "Adrian Vale will pull his investment from Heart Designs. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs." I swallowed hard. 3 years ago, Adrian's company had rescued ours from bankruptcy. The marriage between his family and ours had been part of the agreement. Mom slowly turned toward me. "No. I haven't asked yet. You don't have to. You and Emma are identical." "No. Please." "Mother, that's fraud. It's survival." I looked around the room. The wedding planner was crying harder than Mom. Hairstylists were whispering. 500 guests had already arrived. "I hate this family," I muttered. An hour later, I was wearing Emma's wedding dress. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The cathedral doors opened, and every guest stood. At the altar waited Adrian Vale. He was even more handsome than the magazines claimed. Tall, broad shoulders, perfectly tailored black tuxedo, dark hair neatly styled, and sharp silver eyes that looked like they had never witnessed happiness. As I walked toward him, I prayed identical DNA was enough. His gaze settled on me. "You changed your perfume." My heart nearly exploded. "Did I? You always wore jasmine." "I wanted something different." He continued watching me. "And your smile. What about it?" "It's different." "I'm nervous." "You've never looked nervous before." I forced a laugh. Marriage changes people. One eyebrow lifted, but he said nothing else. The ceremony continued. Every vow felt like another nail, sealing my coffin. When the priest announced, "You may kiss the bride," I forgot how breathing worked. Adrian stepped closer, until I could smell cedarwood and expensive cologne. "Relax," he murmured. "I'm trying." His lips brushed mine for only a second, but my cheeks still burned. Applause erupted around us. Just like that, I accidentally became Mrs. Adrian Vale. The reception was torture. Every guest expected me to remember conversations Emma had apparently had over the past year. Thankfully, Adrian stayed nearby, unintentionally rescuing me each time someone asked suspiciously specific questions. Hours later, we finally reached the presidential honeymoon suite. I immediately changed into my duck print pajamas. Adrian walked out of the bedroom wearing a simple black t-shirt that somehow made him look even more unfairly attractive. His eyes landed on my pajamas. "Interesting. They're emotional support ducks." He poured himself a glass of whiskey before finally speaking. So, you're not Emma." I froze. "How long have you known?" "Since you walked down the aisle." I stared at him. "Then why marry me?" Canceling would have created unnecessary complications. I blinked. "You married the wrong woman because paperwork was inconvenient." "Partly." I grabbed the nearest decorative pillow and threw it at his face. It smacked him perfectly. Silence. He slowly lowered the pillow. "Did my wife just assault me?" "You're lucky that's all I threw." For one brief second, the cold billionaire almost smiled. Then he looked away. Something told me this marriage was going to be far more complicated than either of us expected. This is an original creation by Romance Hobbit. I hope you enjoy and please subscribe. I woke up convinced the wedding had been a nightmare. Then I rolled over and found a platinum wedding band on my finger. Fantastic. When I walked into the dining room, Adrian was already dressed for work, reading financial reports while calmly drinking coffee. Without looking up, he slid a thick folder across the table. Our marriage agreement. I opened it. 37 pages. Are you trying to kill trees? It was necessary. I skimmed the first page. Duration, 1 year. Public appearances, mandatory. Living arrangements, together. Divorce, after 12 months unless mutually extended. I looked up. I'd like a divorce. Denied. I haven't even signed this. I know. You can't reject something before it's requested. I just did. I rubbed my forehead. I already have a headache. He finally looked at me. You'll adjust. Oh, I'm adjusting, mostly to the fact that I apparently married a robot. One corner of his eyebrow twitched. Progress. I disappeared into my room and returned carrying a bright pink notebook covered in cartoon strawberries. My contract. He glanced at the cover. Should I be worried? Extremely. I opened it dramatically. Rule number 1, knock before entering my bedroom. We share a penthouse. We share an address, that's different. He nodded once. Accepted. I blinked. You agreed. It seems reasonable. I prepared an entire argument. You may save it. I frowned. You're ruining my dramatic moment. Next rule. No touching without permission. I wasn't planning to. Wow. What? That somehow hurt my feelings. His lips twitched again. I pretended not to notice. Rule 3, you must laugh at my jokes. No. You didn't even hear one. I've assessed the risk. I gasped. You're judging jokes that haven't been told. I'm protecting myself. Later that afternoon, I decided to prove I could contribute to the household by making breakfast for dinner. The chef had the evening off. How hard could eggs be? Very. 5 minutes later, the smoke alarm screamed. The toast had somehow caught fire. I panicked and threw flour onto the flames. Apparently, that was the wrong decision. Adrian walked into the kitchen just as white powder exploded everywhere. He stood perfectly still, covered from head to toe in flour. I looked at him. He looked at me. I can explain. Please do. I declared war on bread. And lost. Spectacularly. For 3 long seconds, he remained expressionless. Then, he laughed. A real laugh. Deep. Warm. Unexpected. I forgot about the burning toast because I couldn't stop staring at him. The cold, untouchable billionaire actually laughed. The sound suited him far too well. When he noticed me staring, the laughter disappeared almost instantly. What? Nothing. You were looking. I was just thinking. What? You smile better than you scowl. For the first time all day. Adrian had absolutely no response. And somehow, watching the most intimidating man I'd ever met become speechless because of one compliment was the funniest thing I'd seen in years. His phone suddenly rang. He glanced at the screen, and every trace of warmth vanished from his face. It's my grandmother. He answered the call. I only heard one sentence before his expression hardened completely. What do you mean, she's already here? A second later, the penthouse doorbell rang. I looked from Adrian to the front door. He ended the call with a sigh that sounded suspiciously like regret. Don't open it, he said. Before either of us could move, the housekeeper hurried past and opened the door anyway. An elegant elderly woman marched inside wearing a lavender suit, oversized sunglasses, and enough confidence to own the building. She didn't even acknowledge Adrian. Instead, she walked straight toward me. "So you're the girl who finally married my impossible grandson." Before I could answer, she cupped my face with both hands. "Oh, you're prettier than the newspapers made you look." I blinked. "Thank you." Adrian pinched the bridge of his nose. "Grandmother. Do grandmother me." She smacked his arm with her designer handbag. "You've been married for less than 24 hours and your wife already looks exhausted. What did you do?" I raised a hand. "In his defense, I started a kitchen fire." She stared at Adrian. "You made her cook." She insisted. "And you let her?" Another smack with the handbag. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. Adrian Vale, the man who terrified boardrooms full of executives, was being bullied by an 80-year-old woman with perfect lipstick. "I like her," his grandmother announced, linking her arm through mine. "She's staying," Adrian sighed. "She is my wife." "Exactly, which means you're not allowed to scare her away." She dragged me onto the sofa and whispered loudly enough for Adrian to hear. "He's handsome, but don't let that fool you. As a child, he cried because a goldfish ignored him." Adrian closed his eyes. "Grandmother, he also wet the bed until he was 6. I burst out laughing before I could stop myself. Adrian looked absolutely horrified. "You're enjoying this far too much," he muttered. "A little," I admitted. His grandmother stayed for lunch, during which she interrogated us like a detective. "What did he propose?" Adrian answered without looking up from his food. "He didn't," she frowned. "Romantic. We got married because our families wanted us to." She looked between us before smiling knowingly. "Good, that means you'll fall in love the proper way." Adrian and I answered at the exact same time. "Not happening." She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly. "Call me if he behaves like an idiot." "Grandmother, especially if he behaves like an idiot." After she left, the penthouse felt strangely quiet. I turned toward Adrian. "She really hit you with her handbag. Twice. I think I love her." He looked at me for a long moment before shaking his head. "She'll be thrilled to hear that." I smiled. "You know, you're completely different around her. People survive longer if they don't argue with her. You're scared of your grandmother." "Terrified." I laughed again, and this time Adrian smiled without realizing it. It disappeared almost immediately, but I'd seen it. A real smile, and somehow it made my chest feel strangely warm. That evening, as I walked past his study, I heard raised voices. Adrian was on the phone. I said no. A pause. His jaw tightened. "Tell Victor if he comes anywhere near my wife again, I'll personally throw him out." I froze outside the door. My wife. He said it so naturally, almost like he meant it. 3 days later, Adrian informed me over breakfast. "You're attending a charity gala tonight." I nearly choked on my orange juice. "I'm doing what?" "You're my wife. The media expects us to appear together." "Can I fake food poisoning?" "No." "A minor plague?" "Also no." By 7 o'clock, I was standing in front of a full-length mirror wearing a midnight blue gown that somehow made me look far more elegant than I felt. Adrian walked out of his dressing room wearing a black tuxedo. I looked up and forgot what I was about to say. He noticed. "Problem? You clean up adequately." One eyebrow lifted. "Adequately? Don't get cocky." The corners of his lips twitched. During the drive, he gave me a quick briefing. "Smile for photographs, ignore ridiculous questions, stay close to me. Do you always sound like you're giving instructions before entering battle?" "Usually." The moment we stepped onto the red carpet, camera flashes exploded from every direction. Reporters shouted our names. "Mr. Vale, Mrs. Vale, this way." Adrian gently placed a hand against the small of my back to guide me through the crowd. The simple gesture caught me completely off guard. It felt protective. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead while an orchestra played softly. I was busy admiring the decorations when a glamorous woman in a red gown walked directly toward us. She smiled at Adrian first. "It's been a long time." He nodded politely. "Sophia." My smile faltered. She turned to me with perfectly practiced kindness. "You must be Alina. Nice to meet you. I've known Adrian for years." She emphasized the word years. I wasn't imagining it. She was sizing me up. "We worked together on several overseas projects," Adrian explained. "Only worked," Sophia teased with a laugh. I glanced at Adrian. He remained completely expressionless. "Yes," her smile stiffened. "Well, some people believed there was more. People enjoy gossip." His answer was calm, final, and impossible to misinterpret. Sophia excused herself a minute later. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Adrian looked down at me. "You're frowning." "I'm not." "You are." Maybe your friend annoyed me. She isn't my friend. Oh, she's persistent. I looked away to hide my smile. Good to know. Before he could reply, the host invited all married couples onto the dance floor. I immediately stepped backward. Absolutely not. Adrian offered me his hand. We don't have a choice. I have 2 left feet. Then I'll lead. And if I step on you, you'll survive. I laughed despite myself and placed my hand in his. As we began to dance, I accidentally stepped on his polished shoe within the first 10 seconds. Sorry, I expected worse. That's rude. It's realistic. I tried not to laugh, which only made me stumble again. Adrian caught me before I could fall. Suddenly, I was much closer than before, one hand resting against his chest while his arm circled my waist. The music faded into the background. His silver eyes met mine, softer than I'd ever seen them. See, he murmured, you're dancing. My heart forgot its rhythm. Before I could answer, a loud crash echoed across the ballroom. Every head turned toward the entrance. A familiar woman stood there, suitcase in hand. My twin sister, Emma, had come back, and judging by the expression on her face, she hadn't returned to congratulate us. The music stopped so abruptly that the silence felt louder than the orchestra had been. Every guest turned toward the entrance. Emma stood there in a simple cream dress, a small suitcase by her side, and an expression I couldn't read. My heart dropped into my stomach. Adrian's arm was still around my waist from the dance. I gently stepped away. Emma's eyes immediately found me. Then they shifted to the wedding ring on my finger. Her smile was small, almost sad. Hi. That single word somehow carried weeks' worth of guilt. Before I could move, reporters rushed toward the entrance like sharks smelling blood. Cameras flashed. Isn't that Ms. Hart? Why wasn't she at the wedding? Are the sisters together? Adrian quietly stepped in front of me, blocking several cameras with his broad shoulders. No photographs, he said firmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough. Security quickly ushered the reporters back. Emma looked at me with watery eyes. Can we talk? I nodded. Alone. Adrian studied both of us for a moment before speaking. I'll wait outside. As he walked away, I noticed he wasn't leaving us completely alone. He remained just outside the room, close enough to step in if anything happened. The realization made my chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. Emma sat down first. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she whispered, I'm sorry. I folded my arms. That's a very small sentence for a very big disaster. She laughed weakly. I know. Do you? My voice cracked despite my best effort to stay calm. Do you know what happened after you left? Mom cried for 2 days. Dad thought the company was finished. I stopped myself. Emma looked down. I never wanted you to marry him. Well, someone had to. You could have said no, I laughed bitterly. Could I? She didn't answer. I don't blame you for leaving, I admitted quietly. No one should be forced into marriage. She looked surprised. Then why are you angry? Because you left without trusting me enough to tell me. Tears filled her eyes. I was scared you'd try to stop me. Maybe I would have helped you instead. You never gave me the chance. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Ellie. I hadn't heard that nickname since we were children. My anger melted just a little. Where have you been? Traveling, thinking. She smiled sadly. Then I saw the news. You looked happy. I almost laughed. That was excellent camera work. Emma tilted her head. Is he treating you well? I thought about the kitchen fire, his grandmother, the dance, the way he'd quietly shielded me from the reporters only minutes ago. He's annoying, she waited. But, I sighed, he's kinder than people think. Before Emma could respond, the ballroom doors opened. Adrian stepped inside. The reporters have left. He looked at Emma politely. Ms. Hart. Emma smiled awkwardly. Thank you for protecting my sister. Adrian simply nodded. She's my responsibility. The words echoed in my mind all evening. My responsibility, not an obligation, not a burden. Somehow it sounded different. On the drive home, neither of us spoke much. As the city lights blurred past the window, I finally broke the silence. Thank you. Adrian glanced at me briefly. For what? Today. You don't need to thank me. Why not? He looked back at the road. Because protecting my wife isn't something you should be grateful for. It's something I should do. I stared at him the rest of the drive, wondering why my heart suddenly wouldn't stay still. The following Monday, I decided I needed a job. Spending every day wandering around Adrian's enormous penthouse while he worked wasn't healthy for either of us. I found him in his study surrounded by enough paperwork to sink a ship. Busy? Obviously. Excellent, I have a proposal. He looked up cautiously. That sentence rarely ends well. I ignored him and sat across from his desk. I want to work. You already have a job. Existing as your wife isn't a career. Publicly, it is. I'm serious. He leaned back in his chair. What do you want to do? Go back to designing. Before everything happened, I'd worked as a junior interior designer. I loved transforming empty spaces into homes. Adrian considered my answer. Then do it. I blinked. That was easier than expected. Did you expect me to forbid it? Honestly, yes. A little. He looked almost offended. I married you, I didn't buy you. Heat crept into my cheeks. Good point. However, I groaned, there's the catch. You'll be working with my architecture division for your first project. Your employees will think I'm getting special treatment. They already think that. Helpful. You'll have to prove yourself. I grinned. Challenge accepted. By lunchtime, I had my own temporary office. Unfortunately, everyone kept staring at me. One employee accidentally called me Mrs. Boss. Another nearly dropped his laptop when I introduced myself. Around 3 in the afternoon, Adrian stopped by. How's your first day? I've been offered coffee 12 times. That's normal. One intern saluted me. That's less normal. I burst into laughter. Even Adrian looked mildly concerned by that one. Before leaving, he placed a folder on my desk. Your first assignment. I opened it. It was a proposal for redesigning a historic hotel. The project looked incredible. You trust me with this? No, I frowned. Excuse me. I trust you'll either succeed. He paused just long enough to annoy me, or become stubborn enough to succeed eventually. I narrowed my eyes. Is that supposed to be encouragement? It's the closest you're getting. I stood and folded my arms. Fine, let's make a bet. His eyebrows rose. Go on. If my design gets approved by the client, yes, you have to take 1 full weekend off work. Silence. Impossible. Scared. No, then accept. He studied me for several seconds before extending his hand. Deal. I shook it, smiling triumphantly. And if I lose? You spend 1 weekend attending business meetings with me. My smile disappeared. You're evil. I prefer efficient. As he walked away, I couldn't help smiling. For the first time since our ridiculous marriage began, it felt like we were becoming something unexpected. Not lovers, not exactly friends, but partners. Neither of us noticed the woman standing outside the office, watching us through the glass wall. Sophia folded her arms, her expression hardening as she watched Adrian smile, just slightly, at me before walking away. She quietly pulled out her phone. It's time, she murmured to herself. Let's see how strong this marriage really is. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling unusually confident. I'd spent half the night refining my hotel design, and for once, I actually liked what I'd created. That confidence lasted exactly 30 seconds. Every conversation stopped the moment I stepped off the elevator. People glanced at me, then quickly looked away. One employee awkwardly smiled before pretending to study a potted plant. Okay, I muttered. That's not suspicious at all. My assistant hurried over holding a tablet. Mrs. Vale, I mean Alina. Just Alina, she bit her lip. There's something you should see. A gossip website filled the screen. Billionaire CEO secretly rekindles romance with former flame. Beneath the headline was a photograph from the charity gala. Adrian was speaking to Sophia. From the angle, it looked far more intimate than it had actually been. Another photo showed me standing several meters away with an expression that conveniently looked upset. Wow, I said. Whoever took these deserves an award for creative storytelling. My assistant looked worried. There are already hundreds of comments. I skimmed a few. Poor wife. That marriage won't last. Sophia and Adrian always belonged together. I sighed and handed the tablet back. People really have too much free time. Just then my phone buzzed. Adrian, come to my office. I walked upstairs and found him standing by the window, jacket draped over a chair and phone pressed against his ear. I don't care how many websites published it. Remove every photograph taken without permission. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was furious. He ended the call and turned toward me. Are you all right? I blinked. Shouldn't I be asking you that? I'm serious. I smiled lightly. It's gossip. Tomorrow they'll find someone else to bother. He studied my face carefully, almost as if checking whether I was pretending. You don't believe it. Should I? No. Then there's my answer. Something softened in his expression. Thank you. Before I could reply, his secretary knocked on the door. Mr. Vale, the client for the hotel project has arrived early. Adrian looked at me. Ready? I took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. The presentation lasted almost an hour. My palms were sweating by the end of it, but the client smiled as he closed the portfolio. Ms. Hart, he corrected himself with a grin. Mrs. Vale, this is exactly what we wanted. I nearly jumped out of my chair. After the client left, I turned toward Adrian with the biggest smile I'd worn in weeks. I won, he nodded once. You did, I folded my arms. Which means, he sighed dramatically, I owe you one weekend. You certainly do. You've been planning this from the beginning, haven't you? Absolutely. For the first time, he laughed without trying to hide it. Saturday morning arrived, and Adrian looked deeply offended by the existence of free time. He stood in the living room wearing a casual navy sweater, staring suspiciously at the empty schedule on his phone. People really live like this, he asked. I burst out laughing. Like what? Without meetings. Welcome to being a normal human. He frowned. I'm not convinced. Too bad you lost the bet. I grabbed my bag and tossed him a pair of sunglasses. Come on. Where are we going? It's a surprise. 20 minutes later, we were walking through a bustling weekend street market. Fresh flowers, handmade crafts, and food stalls stretched in every direction. Adrian looked completely out of place among families pushing strollers and children chasing balloons. You're smiling, I pointed out. I'm confused. That's close enough. We stopped at a small bakery. The owner recognized Adrian immediately. Mr. Vale, it's an honor. Adrian politely shook his hand. Before the owner could offer free pastries, I interrupted. We'll pay. Adrian glanced at me. Why? Because supporting small businesses means actually supporting them. The elderly baker smiled warmly. Your wife is a smart young lady. Adrian looked at me for a moment before quietly taking out his wallet. She's usually right. I almost dropped my croissant. Did he just compliment me? We wandered through the market for another hour. I convinced Adrian to try homemade strawberry ice cream. He insisted one bite was enough. 5 minutes later, he'd quietly finished the entire cone. Thought you didn't like sweets, I teased. I don't. I pointed at the empty cone in his hand. Evidence says otherwise. He looked down at it with mild annoyance. Traitorous ice cream. I laughed so hard people turned to stare. Later, we passed a carnival game where players had to throw rings onto glass bottles. I nudged Adrian. Bet you can't win. Another bet. Scared, he sighed. You're becoming predictable. 5 throws later, he missed every single bottle. I blinked. You're terrible. Apparently, I paid for one round myself. On my 3rd throw, the ring landed perfectly. The stall owner handed me an enormous stuffed bear almost as tall as I was. I proudly hugged it. Looks like I win. Adrian stared at the giant bear. We're taking that home. Absolutely. It won't fit in the car. Sounds like your problem. He shook his head, but I caught the tiny smile he was trying to hide. As we reached the parking lot, a little girl nearby started crying. Her balloon had slipped from her hand and floated into a tree. Without thinking, Adrian walked over, borrowed a long pole from a maintenance worker, and carefully knocked the balloon free. The little girl hugged it tightly before smiling up at him. Thank you, mister. Adrian simply nodded and returned to me as though nothing had happened. I smiled. You like kids. There. Acceptable. Liar. He looked away. Don't tell my grandmother. Before I could tease him again, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. Be careful. Someone came looking for me today. They were asking questions about your marriage. I don't think this is just gossip anymore. I showed the message to Adrian. His relaxed expression disappeared instantly. He took my phone, reread the text, and quietly said, We're going home. Now. Something in his voice told me this wasn't an overreaction. Whoever was digging into our marriage had just become a real threat. The drive home was unusually quiet. Adrian kept one hand on the steering wheel while the other rested near his phone, as though he expected it to ring at any moment. I stared out the window, Emma's message replaying in my mind. Who would want to investigate our marriage? I finally asked. Adrian was silent for a few seconds. Someone who benefits if it falls apart. Your competitors, possibly. Or someone who doesn't like me. He glanced at me. That list is much shorter. I laughed despite the tension. Thanks, I think. By the time we reached the penthouse, 2 members of Adrian's security team were already waiting. Increase security around Ms. Hart, Adrian instructed. I frowned. I'm standing right here. Exactly. You make me sound like a government secret. You're my wife. He said it so naturally that I stopped arguing. That evening, Emma arrived at the penthouse. She looked exhausted. Woman who came looking for me introduced herself as a reporter, she explained, but she kept asking whether Adrian knew he'd married the wrong sister. Adrian's expression darkened. Did she say who sent her? Emma shook her head. No. Suddenly the butler entered carrying an envelope. This was delivered by courier, sir. Adrian opened it. Inside were several photographs taken from outside the penthouse. One showed Adrian helping me into the car. Another showed us laughing at the street market. Across the final photograph, someone had written in black ink, "Fake MARRAGS always end." A chill ran down my spine. "That's not creepy at all," I whispered. Adrian folded the photographs calmly, but I noticed how tightly he was gripping them. "I'll handle this." I reached out and touched his arm. "You don't have to handle everything alone." He looked down at my hand before meeting my eyes. For the first time since we'd met, he didn't look like the confident billionaire everyone feared. He looked tired. "I'm not used to someone saying that," he admitted quietly. I smiled. "Get used to it." Emma cleared her throat dramatically. "Am I interrupting something?" My cheeks immediately warmed. "No." Adrian looked equally awkward, which somehow made the situation even funnier. Emma laughed. "Good, because if the two of you keep looking at each other like that, I'm going to need popcorn." "Emma," she grinned. "I'm just saying this fake marriage doesn't look very fake anymore." Neither Adrian nor I had a response. The silence between us said far more than words ever could. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I walked onto the balcony and found Adrian already there, looking out over the city. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked. "Too much on my mind." We stood side by side in comfortable silence. Finally, I spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If Emma hadn't run away, would you have been happy?" He thought about it for a long moment. "No." I looked at him in surprise. "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because I would have married the wrong sister." My heart completely forgot how to beat. A week later, the investigation was over. Adrian's security team discovered the anonymous photographs, and rumors had all been arranged by Sophia. She hoped enough gossip would convince the board that Adrian's marriage was unstable, giving her family an advantage in an upcoming business merger. She publicly apologized after the truth came out, and the rumors disappeared almost overnight. Life slowly returned to normal. One afternoon, Adrian found me in my office putting the finishing touches on another design proposal. "Busy?" he asked. "Very, unless you're bringing snacks." Without a word, he placed a small paper bag from my favorite bakery on the desk. I stared at him. "You remembered. You complain less after cinnamon rolls." I laughed. "You're learning." He leaned against the desk, watching me work. "There's something I need to ask you." "That sounds suspicious." "Probably." I set my pencil down. "Go ahead." He took a slow breath. "Our agreement ends in 11 months. "Technically, yes. I'd rather not wait that long." My heart sped up. "Meaning?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out the marriage contract. Before I could ask what he was doing, he calmly tore it in half, then into quarters, then again. The pieces fluttered into the rubbish bin beside my desk. I stared at him in complete shock. "What are you doing?" "Ending the only part of this marriage I never wanted." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Adrian," he stepped closer. "When we got married, I thought it was just another business arrangement." He smiled softly. "Then you threw a pillow at my face." I couldn't help laughing. "You deserved it." "Probably." He gently took both my hands in his. "You made my grandmother laugh more than anyone else. You turned my quiet apartment into a home. You challenged me when everyone else agreed with me." His silver eyes never left mine. "Somewhere between burnt toast, emotional support ducks, and strawberry ice cream, I fell in love with you." Tears blurred my vision. "You really know how to ruin waterproof mascara." "I'm willing to buy more." I laughed through my tears. "That's not the point." "Then let me try again." He squeezed my hands. "Elena Hart," he paused before smiling. "Will you stay married to me? Not because of a contract, not because of our families, just because it's you." I didn't even pretend to think about it. I wrapped my arms around him and kissed him before he could become nervous. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Is that a yes?" "You're lucky I like you." "Only like," I smiled. "Don't get greedy, Mr. Vale." He laughed, a real, warm laugh that still made my heart skip every time I heard it. A month later, Emma started her own travel photography business. My hotel design won a national award. Adrian finally learned how to take weekends off occasionally. His grandmother still hit him with her handbag whenever he worked too much. And the giant stuffed bear I won at the carnival. Adrian insisted it was ridiculous. Yet every morning I found it carefully sitting upright on our bed, exactly where he'd placed it after making the sheets. Sometimes love doesn't begin with fireworks or destiny. Sometimes it begins with a runaway bride, a flying pillow, and two complete strangers who accidentally became exactly what the other needed. And looking back, I wouldn't have wanted our story to begin any other way. The end.